Imagine a world where you call 911 and no one answers. That's the scenario we're diving into today with a book called The Home Doctor. Its whole premise is to give regular people like you and me the practical medical know-how to handle emergencies when professional help just isn't an option. This is an explainer on what it takes to be medically self-reliant when the systems we depend on disappear.
The book kicks off with this really stark line. It's not talking about some far-off apocalypse. It's pointing to a real-world collapse that already happened. Right away, this sets the stakes incredibly high and makes the information feel less like a what-if and more like an urgent necessity.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll dig into that core idea. What happens when help isn't on the way? Then we'll meet the doctor whose methods were literally born from that kind of crisis. After that, we'll cover some life-or-death emergencies, look at some pretty surprising cures, and wrap it all up with the core philosophy behind the entire book.
All right, so let's start with that fundamental idea. The book asks you to really picture a total collapse. We're talking no electricity, no clean water coming from the tap, and, maybe scariest of all, no access to doctors or medicine.
So why this extreme scenario?
Well, the book points a finger at a major weak spot, our global medical supply chain. The argument is that since we get most of our medicines and supplies from just a couple of countries, the whole system is incredibly fragile. One big disruption and a whole lot of people could be left with nothing.
That, of course, brings up a massive question. If the system breaks down, who do you trust? Where do you get good information? The book's answer is you turn to someone who didn't just think about this scenario, she actually lived it.
And that leads us right to the doctor behind these methods. To really get what this book is about, you have to meet its main author. She's a surgeon whose skills weren't just honed in a modern hospital, but were put to the test in the middle of a national meltdown.
So this is Dr. Maybelle Neves. She's a head surgeon with more than 10 years of experience. According to the book, when Venezuela's economy collapsed, her hospital was thrown into total chaos. We're talking no power, no running water, no medicine. Out of sheer necessity, she started developing and pioneering new ways to treat people when all the modern tools were gone.
And here is the absolute key to all of this. The techniques she came up with aren't for other surgeons in fancy operating rooms. They were specifically designed so that ordinary people could use them on themselves or their families. They are meant to be self-applied, which is what makes them so valuable when you are truly on your own.
Okay, now let's get into some of the most critical, life-saving information in the book. This is where we look at how you'd handle two of the biggest, scariest medical events you could face without a hospital nearby: heart attacks and strokes.
Now, what's really useful here is how clearly this is laid out. The book makes a huge point that these four signs don't always show up together in a neat little package. Just recognizing one or two, like that classic chest pressure, along with, say, shortness of breath, is the signal to act, and act fast.
And if you think it's a heart attack, these are the immediate steps the book recommends. Obviously call for help if you can, but while you wait, chewing an aspirin or using nitroglycerin could literally be the difference between life and death. The big takeaway, though, is you have to have this stuff ready to go before you need it.
The book gives the exact same urgent warning for strokes. With a stroke, every single second is critical. It really hammers home that recognizing the signs, sudden face drooping, weakness in one arm, slurred speech, is everything. How quickly you react is the biggest factor in whether someone can recover.
All right, so moving beyond those life or death moments, the book helps you build what it calls a home pharmacy. This section gets into everything from stockpiling the right meds to some really fascinating and kind of weird cures you've probably never heard of.
Okay, this right here is one of the book's most provocative claims. We are all taught, medication's expired, throw it out, right? Well, the book argues, based on what they saw in Venezuela, that most meds are still perfectly safe and effective for years after that date on the bottle. That's a real game changer if you think about it.
So, that leads us to the next logical question, doesn't it? If you're going to start preparing, what do you actually need to get? What are the absolute must-have medical supplies?
Right at the top of that list are antibiotics. The book points to 4 specific kinds that together can fight off a huge range of bacterial infections. The logic is, since they all work a little differently, it's very unlikely that an infection could stand up to all of them. And it even apparently outlines a legal way to get these for your emergency stash without needing a current prescription.
Now this is super important. The book has a big, bold disclaimer. The idea here is to have these for a true end-of-the-world-as-we-know-it scenario, not for your common cold. They make it crystal clear. You should never, ever take these without a doctor's okay in normal times.
The guide also dives into natural remedies, stuff our great-grandparents would have just known. For example, this plant, usnea, also known as old man's beard. It grows all over North America, and the book actually gives you step-by-step instructions for turning it into a tincture that works like a powerful natural antibiotic.
And the weird and wonderful advice just keeps coming. The book is packed with this stuff, using cabbage leaves for inflammation, reminding us that Listerine was originally invented as a surgical antiseptic, and even talking about how leeches were historically used to clean wounds. It's just a wild mix of forgotten history and practical tips.
So what does this all add up to? In our last section, we're looking at the core philosophy of the whole book. This isn't just a list of medical hacks. It's about shifting your entire mindset towards self-reliance.
First off, just to give you a sense of the scale here, the book is a hefty 304 pages long. And it's not just text. It is filled with diagrams and really detailed, step-by-step guides that are made for someone who has zero medical training.
And this quote from the authors really just says it all. The whole point is to empower people to become home docs, to be the person who has the knowledge and the confidence to step up when the official systems have failed. It's about you becoming the first responder for your family and maybe even your neighborhood.
The source material also says the main book comes with a couple of digital bonuses. One is all about finding edible plants in the wild, and the other is about the traditional healing secrets of Native Americans, which really doubles down on that whole theme of self-reliance and forgotten knowledge.
And all of this leaves us with one final big question to think about. When we prep for a crisis, we think about food, water, batteries.